Hello everyone, and welcome to my story. I'm Colby, and here is episode 2 of my personal October challenge. A challenge to create a video every day of October, whether I have an idea or not, whether I feel confident in it or not, in order to gain confidence, gain experience, and get better at this whole video content creation thing. So, now that you've joined me, let's get started. Our story today is in the theme of October, a very spooky one, but the specific content here is for a Dungeons & Dragons storyline. In fact, this is the origin story of a character that I created and began playing today. So, I've had a lot of fun with this character, and he's very, very Halloween themed. So if anybody out there enjoys D&D, feel free to do something similar with this. It's a lot of fun. Disclaimer, the character was very, very, very chaotic evil. So if either your dungeon master is not okay with things like that, or if you do not personally have the restraint to play a chaotic evil character in a way that still makes it fun for both you, your party members, and the dungeon master, then don't get tempted by this character. So, the character's name is Jack. This is not a name that he chose for himself. It was given to him by his new masters. For you see, Jack is a scarecrow who was crafted by a hag in the Fey Wilds. He had many jobs, this scarecrow. He helped the hag get ingredients for her potions. He investigated when people tried to sneak into her territory. He took care of those people that the hag wished to disappear. And of course, he scared away the crows. Because he was crafted by the hag so masterfully, and because his master was so powerful in the arcane arts, Jack himself was born with a lot of power. He could summon scythes and sickles at will from thin air. He could cast curses upon his enemies. He could create darkness out of nothing, and he could appear and disappear from the very shadows themselves. Now, for many years, Jack served his mistress faithfully, but there was a flaw in his design that his mistress was too arrogant to notice, clever though she was. For you see, the hag who created Jack was a member of the unseelie court of Fey, and she crafted him to obey her orders and her orders alone. But he was not crafted in such a way to recognize her and only her. The way in which he saw his orders was to obey the orders of anyone who had the same essence of an unseelie Fey as she did. Now, given that she was the only unseelie Fey in the area, she saw no problems with this and never foresaw what happened next. As a pair of fairies of the unseelie court wandered their way onto her property, found Jack standing in a field, saw that he was a magical construct, and discovered that he obeyed their orders just as readily as his mistress's. And Jack was a very simple creature. He was made to kill things, so he enjoyed killing them. He was made to investigate and keep watch, so he enjoyed doing those things and did them without question. But other than that, he had very little will of his own. He would obey any order an unseelie fairy gave to him. And it did not matter which unseelie Fey it was. And it did not matter when the orders were given to him. He would obey the last order given to him by an unseelie Fey to the best of his ability. And so, despite the fact that he was ordered by his mistress to stand guard in the field until she returned, when he received an order from these two new fairies who wandered onto the property to follow them, he did so. And by the time his mistress came and found him, Jack was gone. Jack being the name that the fairies gave to him. And so now, this scarecrow of the Unseelie court travels with his fairy companions, committing murders, killing those who they need killing, guarding them from their dangers, and getting a rather large collection of faces. We will see where the adventures of Jack the Scarecrow take him. Now, at the end of the story, if you wish to create a character just like Jack the Scarecrow for yourself, the way that I did it was mechanically, Jack is a warforged. This is 5th edition, by the way. Mechanically, Jack is a warforged from Eberron, rising from the last war. I have simply reskinned him in the style of being a scarecrow. His background is relatively new. The timing of this video is right after the new book, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, came out. And he has the background of the Fey Lost. I gave him a little bit of more Fey-style flavor. And his class is a Hexblade Warlock. Now, it was a bit of finagling with the aesthetics to make him Hexblade as opposed to Pact of the Fey, which would be the most appropriate. But he was given his power by a hag of the Unseelie court, a very dark, mystical being. And so I felt Hexblade, given that he was crafted to be a combatant, an assassin, and a guard for her, was not too far beyond acceptability. This also gives him access to the Hexblade's curse and several other curse-style spells. For his invocations, I chose Thirsting Blade. I gave him Pact of the Blade. He's 5th level at this point. I gave him the invocation's Thirsting Blade, which allowed him to attack once more. I gave him... I'm blanking on the name. It's the one that gives you the ability to cast Disguise Self at will. This is how he collects faces. It allows him to take on the appearance of those that he has slain. I think it's Pact of Many Faces, something like that, one of his invocations. And for this final invocation is a classic 5th edition Warlock one, which is Devil's Sight. And that is how he uses the combo of casting the Darkness spell with Devil's Sight, which allows him to see in magical darkness, to just go murder his enemies, which he did very effectively in tonight's session that I played with him. In fact, in the fight in which he showed up for the very first time, he began to act very much like a slasher villain from a slasher horror movie. He walked in and he murdered everyone of his enemies that he came into contact with. He had a very large charisma score, and his Hexblade feature allows him to use his charisma bonus as opposed to his strength or dexterity when making weapon attacks. And this was put to great use when he used his sickles against his enemies. So, if you want to play a character that is like my Jack the Scarecrow, a slasher horror villain brought to life in the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game, feel free. It can really spice up your Halloween games. Happy Halloween, everyone. Happy October, and I will see you next time.